G'day there, you're watching the Aussie BIM Guru. Today I'm tackling a very hot topic in Revit, and that is importing CAD or importing DWG in Revit. As most of you know, this is usually a bad thing. But today I'm going to cover, what you can do to import CAD properly and safely. So today's focus is looking at why you shouldn't usually import CAD. Instead, you should usually link CAD, but I am going to show you some use cases and some workflows that you can use to more safely import CAD files into your models. The trigger for this video was actually another YouTube channel that produces Revit tutorials that showed a lot of people how to import a CAD file into a Revit model and explode it. Now, a lot of people know this isn't a good thing typically, especially in professional projects. And I did get some demand on my comment on this video to show how I would do it. And I don't want to say that necessarily this is a bad video. Sometimes on certain types of projects, you can afford to bring in a CAD detail and explode it. The types of projects that Vulcan Architect typically covers are more like student projects where cleanliness and model auditing aren't as important. But in this case, it is. So one of the mantras that you might hear if you have a BIM manager or a model manager is never import CAD. Now, whilst this is a pretty safe statement to make, it's not always correct. There are some scenarios where you may want to import DWG files. What we mean when we say this as a BIM manager or a model manager is more so don't import CAD unless you know what you're doing or how to do it. Because otherwise you can cause a lot of issues in the model. You need to really know why and how you need to import a CAD file. What it can be like for a BIM manager when you find out someone's importing CAD or has imported CAD, it's a little bit like this. It's a bit like dropping a bomb on the model. You can pollute the model really heavily with a lot of things. So a good BIM manager can actually tell when a user has done this, because they'll notice that suddenly the model is really messy. There's a lot of things in there that shouldn't be there. A lot of line styles with names like import. And whilst it is possible to clean up this mess, it does take a lot of time and it's a waste of money and a waste of resources. So if you can avoid this sneaking into your workflows, it's much more efficient. You can cost up to an hour of work, maybe 2 hours of work with the damage you can do from a bad import. So this is a lot of money in a professional practice. We can't afford to do that. So you can pollute the model with a lot of things when you import CAD incorrectly or at all. Oh, sorry, my cat's jumping all over my keyboard. So I guess had to land on the last page button. So I guess there's a lot of model pollution. I've listed a few things here, some of which I'll touch on during the demonstration. But yeah, it's worth just understanding what all of these things mean in context. But all of them can make the model much harder to work in, especially when you're dealing with 2D elements like annotation objects. So when do we import, I guess, is probably a really good question to answer. So first of all, when we have no other option. That is pretty much the only time I would ever import a DWG object. If, say, you're trying to bring in something like an SAT that you can't link, well, maybe then's a good time to do it. As well as this, sometimes we want to do this when we don't want to maintain a path to a link. This can occasionally happen when you're not working in a server-based environment where everyone has a common static path to a file. Sometimes in this case, importing a CAD file can be preferable. It just depends on your workflows. And I guess on top of that as well, one option is when you're working in a family file, it only allows you to import CAD. I don't believe you can link CAD to a family file still. So in this case, you don't really have a choice, but you do want to clean up that CAD file before you do this. So what I'm going to cover in this demonstration, I'm going to cover quite a lot in a short amount of time. I'm going to use a DWG file that I've just downloaded off the internet, so it's not a clean file by any means. I'm going to show you the difference between a linked file and an imported file. I'm going to show you how to update the link and the fact that you can't update imports, and also just how you can hunt down imports using a add-in that I've been using recently. As well as this, I'm going to show you all the pollution effects that happen when you link, when you import, and when you explode. Exploding obviously being the worst one of the three. I'm then going to show you a workaround that I've seen commonly used to protect the model from all the mess that imported files can bring into Revit. So let's get started. So I'm going to be using Revit 2020 build 2.1. And you will need a DWG file that you can use just for testing. I just downloaded one off the internet. I looked up DWG house plan and took the first file that I found, and it's pretty messy, so that's good. That's what we want. So I guess in this case, this is my DWG file that I've downloaded. It's good and bad. It's not the worst CAD file I've ever seen by any means, but there are some things that are pretty bad. Like, for example, if you go to the walls, the hatches are drawn, so they've been exploded in AutoCAD, which is pretty bad. In this case, you're not even going to be able to explode this file because it's just too big. So what I'm probably going to do is have a copy like this, and I'm going to have a copy with just one of the house plans so that I can actually do a full explode, because there is a limit of 10,000 elements in a full explode in Revit. Beyond that, it just won't let you do it. It's too many elements to bring into the Revit model. This should be enough elements for Revit to handle, I believe. Now, before you bring in a CAD file, you may also want to do a purge. So you just type in purge and just do purge all until there's nothing left to purge. And that will reduce the file size of the file as well, because when you import, you're adding the full file size of that element to your project. You could also do something like an overkill or a flatten to make sure all the lines are sitting flat to the page. I'm not going to bother in this case because I'm pretty sure this is a flat file. In this case, I'm just going to call this modern house, and I'm just going to call this modern house plan. So we have two CAD files. At this point, I'm going to go to Revit, and I'm just in a fresh Autodesk project, so nothing special. It's interesting to note that there already is a little bit of mess in the Autodesk default project as it is. So for example, if you go to object styles and you go to the site category, we have all these elements for a Dodge Viper. So it is funny that even the people that make the software don't really seem to understand how to keep a clean Revit model. Not really that surprising, but that's okay. I digress. So we're going to firstly just link in a CAD file. Now I want to point out that some areas of the model, such as fill patterns, are pretty clean at the moment. Line patterns, pretty clean, no imported styles. Line styles are pretty clean as well. Nothing too crazy, pretty bad naming, but pretty clean. And at the moment, we have no imported object styles under the object styles tab. Now what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to link a CAD file. So I'm going to go link CAD, and I'm just going to track down my house plan set. And in this case, I'm just going to auto detect the units, and I'm not going to orient to view, and I'm just going to bring it into the model. So this should come in, yeah, there it is. So it's brought in everything, all the CAD lines are the same color as they are in AutoCAD, except for white, which is now black. And you can see it's all just one object at the moment. It comes in pinned. You can see it has a shared site available, and that's usually the easiest way to tell an import from a linked CAD file, because an imported CAD file doesn't support a shared site. Also, if I go to manage links, it's come in under the CAD formats tab as a file reference that understands its file size. So it's not inside the file itself, it's just linked into the file. But if I go to, say, fill patterns, we can see that the fill patterns are still the same, which is great. But if I go to line patterns, we can see we've brought in all our AutoCAD line patterns. So that's not great. So typically what you usually want to do at this point, if you do need this CAD file to be like a detail or something like that, you could go to the imported object styles and remap some of these line styles, and then remove the redundant line styles from your Revit model. This way you can sort of protect your model. So for example, if I want to change, say, my grid object style, I can query that layer, and I can see it's on axis dim. And I believe I should be able to go to imports, and I should be able to find that axis dim layer, change the line pattern to, say, I think there's a grid style in here, hopefully, yep, grid line. And now that's converted all those lines, and then I could go to line patterns and just find whichever one is that particular line style. I'm not sure which one it is in this case. Let's just assume it's this Russian line style. And in this case, it should still preserve that relationship in the CAD in the Revit file. That's one way to sort of manage everything. As well as this, it's important to note that AutoCAD brings in all its materials as well, which isn't great. So in this case, this is going to be all these render materials. So you can just usually delete these because we're not typically rendering the model, so it doesn't matter. So it is important to note that linking a CAD file can already pollute a model quite a bit, just on its own. What we're going to do now is we're just going to update our link. Actually, I'll import a copy of this file first. So I'm going to go to Insert. I'm going to change this to just the house plan. So I'm going to reload this CAD link as the house plan. I'm I'm then going to import the house plan. So I'm going to go to import CAD. I'm going to import the house plan with the exact same settings as before. So I'm just going to make sure that I move that off first. So that's over here. So now we have an import and we have a link. So I can see when I change between them that really the only thing that tells them apart to me is the presence of a shared site. It's important to note as well though that when we go down to, I don't think our Revit links, when we go to our manage links dialog, you might think that this points to both of the import and the link instances. You'd be wrong. So if I reload this house plan as the house set, you can see the set updates, but the import doesn't. So the imports sort of become a bit like a block. It's stuck in the model. It doesn't have a reference back to another file. This usually isn't ideal because typically this file might change or get updated. Now the only way to update this, as far as I know, is to just replace it with a new import, which isn't great. As well as this, when I've imported this file, I believe at this point it hasn't brought anything in yet that's unideal, but it will soon. So I think if I explode, that's when everything goes a bit haywire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explode, and you can do a partial or a full explode. I'm just going to do a partial explode. And this is basically going to turn everything into Revit elements, native Revit elements. Keep in mind if there's a block inside the CAD file, this will become a new import instance. Now I believe in this case, I don't think there's any import instances inside this. Oh no, there is. So in here I've got two elements. What are they? There's heaps of them. so check it out. We've just created all these new imported DWG objects. Now I can actually check these out using a little tool that I have called RD8 Explorer, which is an easy way to hunt down imported objects. So in this case, I'm just going to hunt them down. So I can see now I have 46 CAD imports just from exploding one imported object, which is pretty crazy. And I can see that now I have all these blocks that came in. So that's already really messy and really hard to track. You can imagine if you had 20 copies of this import instance and you exploded them all, you just chucked in more than 300 import instances into the model. I believe also, if I go to imported objects, it looks like I've gained another copy of the CAD link as well. So if you import and you link an object, they're not going to be the same object in the object styles as well. So you've already polluted the model further. On top of that, if I go to fill patterns, I don't know if there was any fill patterns in this particular piece of the CAD file. From what I can see, I don't think there was. But usually you would have new fill patterns just for the instance you've imported. So if I go to filter, I've got some detail items. Filled regions. Alright, I'm just going to isolate category. Okay, so I do have one. Oh no, it is. Oh, it's a model pattern. So it's brought in some of these things as model patterns. That's even worse. So you can see that these just get named based on the import instance. So we have imported fill patterns as well, which is pretty bad. We've also imported filled regions, so it gets worse. On top of that, we've imported new text. So we've messed up all of our text in our model as well with some new styles. And as well as that, we'll also find that we have some lines that have come in as well, such as the axis dim line. So all of our layers and their line types have now become line styles. So in here you'll see lots of CAD things all spread out throughout the line styles. And a lot of the time CAD files don't have well-named layers. So you'll find that they won't clump together inside the line style. So it's very hard to detect which ones came in from this specific CAD file. So pretty bad. So you do need to be really aware of not only the risks of importing CAD in regards to being able to track down CAD objects, but beyond that, just the risks of exploding a CAD file and dumping all this data into your Revit model that isn't meant to be there and makes it very hard to know what you're meant to use. Let's say I'm trying to create like a new annotation line. Well, suddenly I'm competing with all these new lines that came in from my CAD file. It becomes a real pain to manage. Maybe I'm trying to pick some text in my model to use. Now maybe a user doesn't understand the text that's meant to be used in the template. They might start using the modern house text, and suddenly your CAD information is just polluted throughout your model. So you do have to be so careful when you do this, and that's why usually it's just better not to do it unless you really know what you're doing or you really need to do it. Now let's look at a way that you can bring in imported CAD pretty safely. So in this case, I'm just going to make a new project from the Autodesk template, and I'm also going to create a new family. So I'm going to go new family, And I'm going to create a detail item family. So a 2D family, essentially. Okay. Now before I even start, I'm just going to go and sort of clean up what's already here, just so you can really tell what comes in from the CAD file specifically. So I'm going to delete all the fill patterns. I'm going to delete all the line patterns. Now I do have a Dynamo script that does this. I'm just doing this to sort of, I guess, show you how it works. And I'm just going to get rid of all the materials. I'll just do a quick purge. So now we have a pretty empty family. There's not really much in this family now that could pollute the model. So I'm going to insert. Now notice I can't link CAD. I can only import. So this is one case where you would need to import CAD. So I'm going to go and import my house plan to my floor plan view. And there we go. I'll just bring it a little bit closer to the origin. Oh, come on. And I'll just dump that here. And I'm going to go and break my golden rule, and I'm going to do a full explode. I'll just check if I've got any other import instances. I believe in this case it looks like I can't actually import it. Yeah, it's got 27,000 elements. Okay, I can't do that. I'll do a partial explode. Partial explode should work. And then I'll just delete all the import instances blocks that are left behind. But yeah, it's going to take a little while. Cool. All right, I'm just going to get all those instances, imports and families. And for now, we're just going to get rid of them. And what I should be left with is all my CAD elements. So I've got a whole bunch of lines, I've got text notes, and I've got detail items. So in this case, the first thing I'm going to go and hunt down is I'm going to check for fill patterns, and I'm just going to get rid of them. But you could change these to a company approved fill pattern at that point if you wanted to. As well as this, I'm just going to hunt down the line styles, and again, I'm just going to get rid of them. But you could convert those over to a company approved line pattern as well. I'm also just going to check my object styles, and sure enough, I've got a whole bunch of object styles. Now again, you could change these names and remap them, but I'm just going to get rid of them. And all these object styles is essentially the line styles inside the family. So you can recognize all the layer names. Now as I get rid of them, you'll see that they're sort of getting undone. So you'll see now, everything will probably just belong to detail items now. If I go to filter, I can see all my lines are now just detail item lines. Now keep in mind too, there's about 4,000 lines there, so that's pretty heavy. All the better reason to keep it in a family rather than the project. That way if you want to delete it, you just delete the family, you don't have to delete all 4,000 lines. Okay, I think there's probably a few other things we could clean up. I mean, we could just get rid of the text if we wanted to. I'll keep it here for now because text here doesn't pollute text at the project level. But the last thing I'd probably check is materials. Sure enough, we've got all the render materials. Go on. Now in this case, I've just done a really almost like a stripping of the model so that there's almost nothing there to really dump in the model at this point. I'll just check my imported objects. So everything's pretty clean. So this would be good for just like a reference object that you want to bring into Revit. If it's not important graphically how the element really looks, this is perfect. But if it is important, then you'd probably want to rename or remap everything to things in your company standard. I'll just call this testing and just save it in files. And I'll just load this into my project. And I'll place it. And this becomes a bit like a block at this point that you can just place any number of times. And it shouldn't go and pollute your model. So if I go to manage object styles and I check my imported objects, you can see it's clean. If I go to model and I go down to detail items, you can see that it's pretty clean. It's got all the rubbish in the Autodesk template, but it doesn't have anything from what we've just done. If I go to fill patterns, model, you can see that we haven't dumped in those model patterns. And if I go to line patterns, you can see that we've sort of protected the model from those import line patterns as well. So this is usually a much safer way to work between Revit and DWG if you use families as your processing environment before you dump it into Revit. Now, yes, it does take more time, but you're going to make people on your team a lot happier, and you're going to help your BIM manager get out that little bit earlier as well. So do keep that in mind. So I hope that this has sort of helped you see ways that you can manage importing DWGs without making people's life difficult. So remember, don't import CAD unless you know how. Now you know how. So the presentation for this will be on GitHub, and all my other files are there as well. So I hope that this has helped people learn a better way of doing things, and I'm also interested to hear from other people that have made videos on the topic, such as Balkan Architect. I hope that this is interesting for you as well as an alternative approach. If you're not already following and subscribing, feel free to do so. I plan to make videos for a while. I'm probably taking a break soon, but I'll be back after that. And I look forward to seeing you on future videos. Thanks. Take care. Bye.